Okay, I'll just start with telling you what camera we used for every project from then until now. On Sock Baby, we shot the first half of the movie with the VX2000.
I hate that camera, by the way.
I do too.
I really hate that camera. We had one, it sucked.
It worked.
I filmed the documentary for PBS, it sucked.
It worked okay for a while until we turned it off and turned it back on and everything looked different. And then the other half of the movie we shot with Justin's, I think it's a Canon.
No, his is Sony Handycam.
Sony, right.
Because it says Handycam. We've shot things on VHS. That looks pretty good.
Gauntlet of Sorrow we shot on my broken Hitachi Digital Wave camera. Tyrants of Nazca, we used these things.
There was one scene shot with a 3-chip camera. It looks like a Spanish soap opera.
Right. And the new movie that I can't tell you the title of yet, we're going to be shooting it on Canon HZ something.
HG10 something.
HG10 something. We don't know.
Or HG10.
I can't remember these numbers. And we shot
one scene. Mean anything.
I know. We shot one scene on the JBC something. The bigger version of this that's like this big.
110U.
110U.
Only reason we filmed the 24p is the new camera that we're going to be shooting the movie on. We didn't get in time. Ask me about that sometime. And it's 24p, it's 1080p, but it'll only do 24 frames per second. It won't do 30p, which meant that the only camera we had available that would do 24p was the JVC 3-chip.
That's a big no-no.
So, okay, there you go. That's what we're shooting on. That's what we have shot on. Just to get that out of the way. What else?
I was thinking that you were going to say Canon Allura at some time, because for some reason I thought I gave you the old Canon Allura.
Right.
But I didn't. I gave it to my parents. Lighting, composition, interesting things happening in frame is much more important than the camera. People tend to buy whatever the most expensive gadget out there is and swear it's the best. I've had people ask me what kind of camera I use. I show them, I used to use the Canon Allura that had progressive scan. I really liked it because we do special effects and the interlace fields cause problems when you're doing special effects. And I'd show them this camera and they'd be like, oh, well, I've got a GL2, that's better than your camera. Then why did you say you liked the way my stuff looked and asked to see my camera?
Well, the Canon Allura was this camera that Ben used to have, that he shot 32, and did you shoot
Verville on it?
Somewhere near Verville, which you can watch on our website.
Diamond San Lorenzo and Epiphany, and you used it for some of the early Battle Jitney stuff.
Yes. That was like one of my favorite cameras. Before HD, that camera was like the best camera you could get.
Yeah, it was only, I think it was $1,000. They changed it. It became the Allura 2 or something, and it wasn't as good. They took away the one feature was it had progressive scan. And the colors and everything was great. It had a nice flat focus. It was a tiny little thing, looked like a joke whenever you were filming. It was this big. And
big as a deck of cards, would you say?
It was like this. When I actually pulled it out of the box, I thought it wasn't there. It's like I opened the box, I pulled out all the stuff, it's like, where's the camera? And then I realized I'd already taken it out. That's how small it was.
Wow.
And it was $1,000. GL2's, GL1 was out of it. GL1 was coming out when I bought that camera. That was going to be $3,000. The XL1 was $5,000. I had used the XL1. They were saying, oh, the GL1's got the same chips. Isn't that great? I'd used the XL1 and I didn't like it. It looked like a Spanish soap opera. I actually like single-chip cameras better than 3-chip cameras. The 3-chip camera's better. It's more sensitive to light. Yeah, but if you're doing a film, you're lighting like you would for film, and you actually have to put a lot of light out there. A single-chip camera has a flatter focus, actually, because it's 3 chips. No matter how big the chips are, they're based on the prism. The focal point's based on the prism that divides up the image, and that's usually about that big, regardless if the CCDs are that big. The prism's that big. So I like single-chip cameras. They tend to not be as sharp, and I like that. The colors are a little more soothed, which we're going to desaturate them to make it look more like film anyway. Well, actually, that's not even make it look like film. They just tend to desaturate feature films. 3-chip cameras. People will say it gives a better image. That's what professional TV looks like. Have you used a 3-chip camera? Because that's what it looks like. It looks like either TV news footage or a soap opera at best. You're doing the serious film, and the whole time you're thinking, this has bad lines and cheesy acting. And it's not that it does, it's that it reminds you of a soap opera.
I remember showing people stuff on the Allura and them thinking that it was shot on film.
Yeah, same thing.
Because you couldn't tell. It wasn't 24p because they didn't even make cameras back then that shot in 24p that I remember.
It was 30p, and that was a big deal.
And
big deal.
I've got a P.
It was progressive scan, that's what makes it look like film. Don't let anybody tell you anything else if it's got progressive scan, which even now is tricky to find for some reason.
Yeah, I know.
I don't even know why they make cameras that don't do it.
Yeah, it's the only spec I really look for. I actually look for single chip things and progressive scan. And it's hard to find it.
I have a progressive scan DVD player.
That's good.
It's like if you get an HD camera right now and it doesn't shoot progressive scan, it, in my opinion, is worthless.
Well, it looks like television footage, which we're making movies. If you're shooting documentaries for TV or whatever, great. But we're not.
If somebody tells you all these great specs about a camera, and you pick it up and you look at the image and you don't like it, like, I'm not an expert on cameras by any means, but I mean, what good is it if you don't like what it looks like?
Yeah, I mean, if you take, oh, this is this sensitive light, it's got 3 chips. CCDs are this size, which in a 3 chip is a lie. You can't even figure out how flat the focus is, the depth of field, because of the prism. They're not telling you what the prism is. They can tell you all these specs. Will that tell you what it'll do with the particular shot? No, not at all. There's a lot of new cameras out that claim to be 1080i. The problem is they're interlaced, so we can't use them because we'll end up having to interlace them for effects and whatnot, and that's cutting the resolution in half.
What does interlaced mean?
Interlace means, as opposed to progressive scan, that one half of the fields, usually say the odd or even numbers, is taken first and 1/60th of a second. The second 60th of a second does the other one. So 1, 3, 5, 7 going across is all done at 1/60th of a second, and a split second later, the second 60th of a second later, the rest of it's taken. So the problem is, if you have any kind of action, if I move my hand across the thing like this with interlace, half of my hand is here. If you stop the frame, this kind of cross section of the odd number pixels is here, and the even numbers down here. When I went like that, it was faster than the frame could stop. Progressive scan means like film, where the camera takes the entire image in one swoop. So if I go like this, you get some motion blur, but my hand is all intact. The reason interlace exists is back when television was invented, they couldn't get the phosphors in the TV to stay bright enough to do 30 frames per second and not have it be flickering, because it would fade away before the next frame came up. So what they figured out is if we do all the odd pixels and then the even number, they'll be going like this, and it won't look like it's flickering, because it'll be faster. For some reason, that technology has continued to this day, and people still use it. And it really is a detriment to any kind of special effect work, anything where you're going to be changing the frame rate. The general feel is a little more fluid than progressive scan, but progressive scan, because of that, looks more like film. Because film, although physical, is video, it uses progressive scan, because obviously a piece of film doesn't take half its grains of film at one time, the other half the other.
If you don't know what interlacing is, watch an episode of The Wonder Years.
Interlace sucks.
People like to say that 24 frames a second is like the magic number that makes something look like film. This is a lie.
30p is actually, being a faster frame rate, allows us to do more things. 24p is 24 frames per second was based on where cameras generally were when sound was invented for film in the 20s. They just never, it had been increasing from 15 to 18 to anything really up to 24, and that's where they locked it. And the problem with that is you do a medium-sized pan and it looks really jerky. With 24p you have to learn to either do a whip pan where it blurs, or do it slowly, because otherwise you can tell how slow the frame rate is.
24p has nothing to do with image quality or making it look like a movie or anything.
No, it's got crawl like a movie. That's not a good thing. That's a bad thing about film.
The reason that you think it's the magic number is because you're used to seeing it. You've never been alive in a time when a movie has been made at a different frame rate. So you that's just what you think. I mean, you could shoot a movie at 30 frames a second and it would work better.
You can. They have IMAX presentations where they show 60 frames or even 120 frames per second. They actually play it back at that speed, and it's weird. It's a different effect. It doesn't look like your normal cinema. It looks like light. It's just real in front of you.
So why don't we do that more often then?
It costs a lot of money. A lot of money.
It's like most of the technology. I'm not an expert, but most of the technology is just geared for, in film, is just geared for 24 frames per second. And I think that's the reason everybody's used to it, and they think, whoa, now we can make video cameras that can shoot in 24 frames a second. In my opinion, that's a step backwards. Because you have a video camera, you can make it shoot at any frame rate you want it. And I think in a few years, if all the projectors in the world are digital, there's no reason to limit your frame rate to a certain number.
Yeah, there's been talk about, because of the influx of video, there's been talk of raising the standard of film to 48 frames per second to give a better image. It would cost a lot of money though, so that and since digital projection's taken off, they just think there's no point. People will say, oh, but that's not the way things used to look. If you've seen a prime print of a film, or a film where somebody edited it and then seen what's actually shown in your local theater, they are so vastly different. The quality degradation is so horrible. If you see it back and forth, it looks like if you film something on HD and then you put it on VHS tape and showed it, that's how bad the degradation between film prints is. And that's why people say, oh, I love film, don't go to digital. But the people making these images are spending millions of dollars to bring you this beautiful image, and it's being ruined.
Now I've got your name. What is it become?